Hello everyone, my name is Denise Garcia. I'm Chief Compliance Officer for InfiniTrak. And today I'm going to present to you a webinar about the Drug Supply Chain Security Act and how it impacts you. Here at InfiniTrak we understand that the new requirements are very complicated. And what I'd like to do for you now is to kind of go through the basics so that you have a good understanding of what these new regulations require from you on a day-to-day basis. With this knowledge, we're hoping that we can provide you with guidance that will take the kinks out of compliance so that your track and trace experience is smooth and uncomplicated. So I'm Denise Garcia. I'm an attorney by training. I have a degree from Harvard Law School. I have over 20 years of healthcare experience. In the last couple of years, I've been focusing on compliance, helping healthcare entities figure out some practical solutions using technology to make sure that they're compliant with their requirements. Our team at InfiniTrak, our executive team, also has at least 20 years experience in their respective fields. We have expertise in supply chain management, government relations, marketing, and technology. So I'm going to start with the basics. What is the Drug Supply Chain Security Act? It's the second part of a law that was passed in November of 2013 called the Drug Quality and Security Act. The first part of the law dealt with compounding and regulates compounding facilities. And the second part deals with track and trace. And I'm going to call this from here forward the track and trace law. The goal of the law is to create a nationwide database so that any drug can be tracked through the system from manufacturer all the way down to the patient. At the beginning of the law, when it began, which is January of this year, it's requiring tracing of ownership and product information down to the lot level. The law rolls out over the next 10 years, and by 2026, it will require mass serialization using 2D barcodes so that you could track a product all the way down to the unit level. So if there's some sort of recall and some dangerous medicine is out there in the supply chain, FDA can find out which patients have it, and we can remove that product from the supply chain. So why do we need this new track and trace law? Well, surprisingly, I think it might be a surprise to some of you that up to 10% of drugs sold worldwide are actually counterfeit. And it's not just worldwide. In our country, if you look, for instance, at Pfizer, back in 2008, Pfizer had 20 products that they knew were subject to counterfeiting. But in 2014, that number grew 3 times, and there were 60 Pfizer products that were subject to being counterfeited. Another example is in 2012, the cancer drug Avastin was discovered, a counterfeit was discovered in the supply chain. And the counterfeit drug market is a $200 billion industry, and it is steady, and there's no sense that it's going away anytime soon. So we need to be aware and prepare for that. So many of you may say, I've never seen a counterfeit drug. I don't believe I've ever had one come across my shelves. Well, here's a picture from a Pfizer brochure. The drug on the right is the real drug, and the one on the left is the counterfeit. And as you can see, they're pretty close. So my question to you all is, would your staff be able to recognize this when they're filling a prescription? Does your staff have the proper training to know what to look for? The ultimate goal of this law is, of course, patient safety. We want to make sure that there is no dangerous product that gets in the supply chain and patients end up getting hurt as a result. So now I'm going to turn to some of the main terminology of the new law. So the first term that you need to learn is called trading partners. And what that's referring to is anyone who buys and sells drugs in the supply chain would be a trading partner. of course, the manufacturers, the distributors, and the dispensers. 3PL is a third-party logistics provider who basically would help with shipments or some sort of administrative parts. They don't have ownership, so even though the law does talk about them a little bit, the trading partners that you need to focus on are the manufacturers, the distributors, and the dispensers. Now, dispensers are where pharmacists fall. Anyone who purchases drugs that are delivered to a patient would be considered a dispenser. The definition is quite broad. It encompasses a lot of different types of healthcare entities who probably don't realize that they fall under this new law. That would include nursing homes, assisted living facilities, physicians, perhaps like a dermatologist who might sell his own branded products out of his office to his patients. All of that falls under this track and trace law. The one area that's pretty much exempt are compounding pharmacies if all they do is compounding. As I mentioned earlier, compounding is covered in Part 1 of the DSCSA, and therefore they're regulated by that and not by the track and trace law. There's one exception, however. If a compounding pharmacy is using a finished product in their compounding, that finished product is needs to be tracked and traced, and so any products that would included finished products would have to be fall under this law for tracing purposes. So this law really boils down to 3 different requirements. The first requirement is verification. You need to make sure that your trading partners, the companies that you buy your drugs from, and any companies that you might sell any drugs to. For instance, if you have a neighboring pharmacy that's short of a supply of something, so you're going to sell him one of your products, you need to make sure any of those entities are properly licensed in their state or on the federal level. The second requirement has to do with quality inspection and reporting, and that means that if there's any indication that you have that a product might be suspect or tampered with, or even the source from a fraudulent source, if you get any information in those regards, you need to be able to conduct an investigation to decide whether the product is suspect, to put the product into quarantine while you conduct that investigation, and then you have an obligation to notify your trading partners and the FDA in the event you find a harmful suspect product. And the third requirement has to do with capture of transaction data, which is all the information about the drug and ownership trail in the supply chain, and you need to be able to store that information and retrieve it when requested, and store that information for 6 years. Now I'm going to break down each one of these and talk about them in more detail. So the first requirement has to do with trading partner verification. As I mentioned earlier, manufacturers, wholesalers, and dispensers all need to be licensed, but they're all licensed slightly differently. Manufacturers are licensed by the FDA, and as part of this law, FDA has created a database that they have put online that they've asked all manufacturers and distributors to once a year self-report their licensure, and that is contained in this database. So that's how manufacturers are licensed. Wholesale distributors can register their information with the federal database, but they are also licensed in the states. So some states have electronic databases and some don't. But that's where you need to check to make sure that the distributor is properly licensed. Now let's say you use a distributor who's located out of state. You need to make sure that the out-of-state wholesaler does have proper licensing in your state. And you also need to make sure that each facility location, because the licenses are issued by location, by address, if you receive products from more than one facility, both of those facilities need to be verified to make sure that they have proper licensing. And lastly, you need to make sure that you have proper licensing, because your trading partners want to verify your status as well. So you have to make sure that your own license does not lapse while you're buying and selling drugs. So what this first requirement means, broken down to the basics, is that before you purchase a product from a new wholesaler, you need to make sure that that wholesaler is licensed to do business in your state. So if you have a primary wholesaler, you might have a secondary or two, and you have a new one coming along, there might be some special that looks good you got a flyer about. Before you order from them, you need to check to make sure that they're properly licensed in your state. And as I mentioned earlier, you need to make sure that your own licensure is up to speed as well. Now, I just want to mention that our product, InfiniTrak, does meet all of the requirements of verification for you. We have created a system to pre-screen all of your trading partners. When you register with us, you will be contacted by customer care experience team member, and they will walk you through making sure that your trading partners are verified. And we also will do regular checks against the FDA database. We also have a corporate document repository where you can store perhaps like your own license, so that you actually have a copy of it in there with the expiration date, or any of your trading partners as well. And we will also send you reminders if you or your trading partner's license is coming up for expiration, so that you get a new copy and verify that they're still active. The second part of the requirements have to do with having a process in place to be able to deal with any suspect product. I must mention that the verification part that I discussed and this part are currently in force. They apply to you right now. If FDA were to show up at your store tomorrow, they could fine you on these two pieces, because you should have something in place for them already. This began in January of 2015. So what you need to do under this requirement is that you need to have a process in place to inspect, investigate, and quarantine any potentially suspect product. Now, the law actually uses the term promptly with regard to investigations. And even though that's not defined, what we do know from the nature of the law is that promptly is fairly quick. If a manufacturer gets an inquiry about asking someone to verify, if someone asks them to verify a product, under the law they have 24 hours to respond. FDA requires a dispenser to provide information to them within 48 hours. So what that means is promptly is pretty quick, and I would recommend in just a few days you should have a solution to any product that you might think is suspect. Quarantine is basically you need to have a location in your store where you separate the items that are potentially suspect. Probably would recommend keep them under lock and key. Have a log to know what's in there, when it was put in there, when it was taken out. Make sure that temperature controls are appropriate. And you have this area where it will not be mixed up with your regular inventory. And then the last part is you need to notify your trading partners if there is any potentially suspect product. So what is a suspect product? A suspect product could be one that's potentially counterfeit or stolen. It could be something that was tampered with, like that picture we saw, or it could be a product that the product is about to expire and someone went and changed the packaging on it to make it look like it has a new expiration date. It might be drugs that were bought under a discount Medicaid program, but someone's diverted them and they're selling them on the commercial market. So it could be part of a fraudulent transaction. Or really any sense from you. It could even be information from one of your clients, that your customers come back and say, you know, that last bottle you gave me, there was something wrong with it. Whatever it might be, if you get any inclination that something might not be right, the best practice would be for you to investigate, quarantine the product, and just verify that it's in fact authentic. So here are a couple of scenarios that might warrant quarantining a product that might not actually come into your normal thought process. The first one, let's say that you ordered a product, you ordered 5 units, and it was a really good price, and they sent you 10 units, and you decided instead of returning that extra 5, you'd like to keep them. But you only have the transaction data for those 5 products. They didn't send you for the extra. In that case, if you have an overage and you don't have transaction data to go along with it, technically under the law, you're supposed to put that product in quarantine until you contact your wholesaler and get that information, or you return the product, or however you decide to handle it. Of course, if a product appears unusual, you would put it into quarantine. If there's odd behavior of a business partner, all of a sudden they stop responding to you, there seems to be something different. It could also be that you notice that one of your wholesalers' licenses has lapsed. Let's say that you've been ordering for them steadily over the last 2 months, but 3 months ago their license expired. That product that you've received in the last 2 months, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's suspect, but you should probably go through the process of putting it into quarantine and verifying the authenticity of the product before continuing. And of course, if you receive an FDA recall notice about a product, it would be appropriate to add that product to quarantine as well. InfiniTrak handles all of the suspect product processes for you. We have a built-in suspect product wizard that assists you in analyzing a situation where a product, there's something wrong with the order. It could be simply that there's a broken bottle and you want to go through that process. It could be an overage, or you didn't get enough product, or it could be looking at an investigation for a potentially suspect product. The wizard actually walks you through a series of questions, and based on your answer to the questions, other questions will pop up. And what it does is kind of walks you through the law, so you don't have to remember the details of the law. You just walk through the wizard, and then you can come to a conclusion after you walk through the questions of what you think, whether it might be suspect or not. There is a field where you can add notes, you can upload pictures and documents, and then the system will store all this information for an additional 6 years. If you have to quarantine a product, the software does allow you to print out labels. It'll automatically identify the date that it was put into quarantine, as well as the information about the product. And it also has a quarantine log, so you can track any products that you have in quarantine and which staff have put it there. So the third requirement of the law is the one that's been delayed until March 1st of 2016. And this is the part where you are not allowed to accept ownership of a product unless you also receive product transaction data along with the product. So basically, a transaction under the law is any change of ownership of a product. So when the manufacturer sells the product to the wholesaler, that's a change of ownership. When the wholesaler sells it to you, that's another change of ownership. So anything, it's sort of like a car title, where your car title shows you, who owned that car from the time it left the manufacturer. The same thing with the transaction data. It has a history of all the different owners of a product. You have to be able to receive this information, store the information, and then in the event there's any inquiry about any of the products, you have to be able to retrieve it and give that information to the FDA within 48 hours. So what is transaction data? Transaction data refers to 3 different subparts. The first is the basic information about the product, an NPC number, the lot number, the name, the manufacturer, their address. The second part is the chain of ownership. It's, who was the purchaser, what was their address, who did they sell it to, what was their address, all the different owners of the product. And the last part is a statement that's made by the seller of the product, and it's basically attesting to the authenticity of the product. The statement basically says that the seller is authorized to do business, that the product complies with the track and trace law, and that all the information is complete and accurate. If you were to sell a product to another pharmacy, you would also be making that statement as you sell it to the other pharmacy. So what products are covered under the law? Basically, the law covers most finished human prescription drugs. There are a few exceptions. There are details in the law itself about these exceptions. So I would encourage you, if you want more information about that, to actually look at the language of the law itself, especially for like the combination kits. It's pretty detailed about what's considered under that exception. There's also some relationships that are accepted from the definition of transactions. So when a manufacturer sends a physician drug samples, there's no requirement for track and trace on those. If you are dispensing for a specific patient need, so if you get a call from the local hospital and they're short of a particular medicine and they need to fill a prescription for a specific patient, you do not need to send transaction data over to the hospital. That's exempt. Of course, if you're dispensing directly to a patient, that is also not included. Any transfers between affiliated entities, that means common ownership and control. So if you have a large hospital system, you might have a flagship hospital and other hospitals, and they're all corporate entities, and they transfer drugs from one to the other. Could be a nonprofit or for-profit. Anything like that, they do not have to send a transaction data along when they transfer. And then there's also an exception for licensed practitioners who are using products in their office while providing service. So an example of that might be a dentist who is using lidocaine while performing in-office dental procedures. That lidocaine does not need to be tracked and traced. That's different from the dermatologist I mentioned earlier, who has a small little shelf with branded products that he is selling to his patients to take home and use at home. Those would have to be tracked and traced. So knowing that the whole supply chain of pharmacy trading partners don't all have the latest technology, FDA is allowing different types of forms of providing the transaction data for the first couple of years of the law. In November of 2017, manufacturers will only be sending electronic data after that time. So you have until then to really get an electronic system in place. But for the moment, the information can be sent on paper, invoices, emails. I know a lot of your primary wholesalers are providing a solution to you by giving you access to a web portal. So let me just say a little bit about that. A web portal, you go on and you can access the information at any time, but it's not a full solution for you. I'll give you a couple examples. Let's say that you want to change your wholesaler. You want to renegotiate and go with someone else. What are you going to do with that information that they're holding for you? And they may allow you to download it, but will it be in any searchable format? Are you going to be able to read the data? And it could be a lot of it if you were to change wholesalers. Secondly, if you have more than one source that you use, if you have a primary and secondary wholesalers, you won't have all that information in one place. So if there's a recall or if FDA comes asking about a particular product, you might have to be searching around different types of databases, looking at some paper files. Our InfiniTrak product keeps it all in one place for you. It makes it really easy for you to do searches so you can find the products that you're looking for quickly. And then the standard that everyone is moving towards is what's called EDI, or the electronic data, and our product accepts EDI from your wholesalers. That means that the data, the electronic transaction information, comes over electronically into your account, and it's readily available to you at any time. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you sell a drug to another pharmacy, a hospital, emergency medical techs for the local ambulance company, whatever it might be, you need to deliver outgoing transaction data along with that product. And that requirement, by the way, is in effect right now. You're supposed to be doing this as of January 1 of this year. Here are a few scenarios that I just want to cover that are a little bit unique and that will affect dispensers. One has to do with lot numbers. There's an exception in the law that allows manufacturers and distributors who buy directly from a manufacturer, they do not have to put lot numbers in their electronic data. And the reason is there's no technology right now that could easily read lot numbers off of products. Lot numbers are located in a variety of places. Sometimes it's on the packaging, sometimes it's on the bottle, and because there is no technological solution industry-wide that everyone could use, they've asked for a delay in that part of the law. So that is delayed for the first couple of years of the law. What that means to you is there are some instances where you may have to add the lot numbers to your information. One is if you are selling the product to someone else. You are required to add the lot number and the shipping date if you have it with that outgoing transaction data. So you would have to manually enter that in. Another scenario that I just wanted to mention was drop shipments. You will be receiving the transaction data from the shipper in that instance and not from the distributor. For 340B products, this is sort of the gray area. The track and trace law conflicts with the 340B law, and I know that there is a group of stakeholders who have petitioned FDA for some clarity, and they're waiting for an answer on this. But for the moment at least, transaction data will be delivered to the covered entity or the sponsoring hospital rather than the contract pharmacy itself. So the contract pharmacies are going to have to work out some solution with their covered entity or the hospital. And lastly, I wanted to mention returns. At the beginning of this law, dispensers do not have to send transaction data back with a return. They just simply return the product to the distributor. So with regard to the transaction data requirements, our software covers all of the different requirements for you. We have a centralized database that aggregates all of your data from all of your trading partners. It's easily searchable. You can write reports about it. You can enter information either manually if you have a shipping notice, a piece of paper that the distributor sent you with the transaction data. You can either scan it in and attach it as a PDF, or you can enter information manually as well. And we also allow you to be able to create outgoing transaction data. If you're selling a product to someone else, the system does generate that for you, and then you can go ahead, send it to them electronically if they are on InfiniTrak, or you can generate a PDF and send it to them that way as well. So just a little recap again. I know it's a lot of information and there's a lot of detail in it, but the three things that you have to remember is there are three requirements in the law. The first is you have to verify your trading partners, make sure that they're properly licensed in your state. Second, you have to have a process in place for suspect products and a potential quarantine. Our solution comes along with a model policy for you to use for your store if you would like. And then the third part is you have to keep and maintain and be able to search your transaction data information, and you have to keep it for 6 years. Thank you all for listening to this webinar. If you have any questions about the law or about our software, please feel free to contact Sally Flynn. She's our customer experience support lead at Sally@infinitrak.us. Thank you so much. Have a great day.